Before I even begin, I need to warn you. This is something I never wanted to write down. I'm using a throwaway account because I can't have this story attached to me. I'm about to graduate high school, and what I found out just days ago still makes me feel physically sick. Even as I type, my hands are trembling. There was this guy at my school. I'll call him John. He wasn't the type of person who drew attention, the kind of kid who fades into the background, quiet, polite, someone you might exchange a casual joke with in the hallway, but never think twice about afterward. Not an outcast, not popular, just there. He was even friends with some of my closer friends, which is the only reason I eventually found out who he really was. At the start of senior year, I'd see him occasionally. Nothing unusual, no strange behavior, no warning signs. Then in January, I started noticing him a little more, passing in the halls, walking into the library, even standing near the cafeteria doors. I brushed it off. Schools are crowded places. People cross paths all the time. But then came February. For the first week, he was there, as always. And then, gone. Just like that. One day he was at school. The next day, it was as if he had been erased. No goodbyes, no rumors, no explanation. I assumed his family moved, or maybe he transferred. I didn't care enough to ask. Until a few days ago. I was joking around with one of my closest friends online when the topic of school shootings came up. I don't even remember how. It was just random, morbid teenage banter. But then my friend suddenly typed, "Hey, do you remember John?" I said yes. And then he sent the message that froze my blood cold. "Dude, you know he was planning to shoot up the school, right?" I laughed at first. I thought it was some messed up attempt at a joke. But my friend wasn't laughing. His tone shifted instantly. He was deadly serious. That's when he told me everything. John had been planning a massacre. Not just random thoughts, plans. He had detailed journals, social media accounts dedicated to violent fantasies, and, most disturbing of all, he had confided in his closest friends. He had told them the exact day they should stay home. The only reason it never happened was because one of those friends, maybe the only real one he ever had, reported him to the authorities before it was too late. My friend went on, and the horror settled deeper into my chest. John wasn't just fantasizing. He had a list. He had a timeline. He had a strategy. He even had access to weapons, easier than you'd think. His father worked in law enforcement. Getting guns would have been no challenge at all. That realization made me want to throw up. I had joked with him before. I'd shared a classroom with him, stood beside him in the halls, smiled at him as if he were just another face in the crowd. And all the while, somewhere behind those quiet eyes, he was building a plan to destroy everything around him. When his friend finally came forward, the police acted fast. He was arrested, expelled, erased from the school almost overnight. That's why he had vanished so suddenly. But what haunts me is what we don't know. How close was he to doing it? How many times did he replay it in his head? How many of us were already marked as names on that list? The police never released the full details. Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe they knew the truth was too much for the rest of us to handle. But I can't stop the questions from eating at me. What if his friend had stayed silent? What if the authorities brushed it off? What if the day had come and I had been there? Now, whenever I picture John's face, I don't see the quiet, harmless student I once thought I knew. I see the monster hiding underneath. I see the smile that covered a mind filled with bloodlust. He could have changed everything. He could have destroyed hundreds of lives, mine included. And I pray I never see his face again. Wherever he is now, I hope he never gets another chance to finish what he started, because the thought of him walking free someday is enough to make my stomach turn all over again. When I was in my early 20s, still naive enough to think the world was safer than it truly is, I worked at a bustling sports bar and restaurant. We had a popular lunch special, the kind that drew in the same regular customers day after day. Most of them were harmless, office workers, retirees, construction crews. But then there was him. His name, at least the one he gave me, was Michael. Our first meeting didn't strike me as particularly strange at the time, but something about it stuck with me afterward. He was polite, soft-spoken, but there was a strange sharpness in his gaze, as if he was sizing me up in ways I couldn't quite read. Before he cashed out, he mentioned he had a son, a lawyer, and tried to set me up with him. I was young, had a boyfriend, and laughed it off. At the time, I thought it would be a one-off interaction, a weird moment, nothing more. I had no idea it was the beginning of something that would crawl into my life and shadow me for years. Months passed, and then, like clockwork, Michael began appearing at the restaurant during nearly every one of my shifts. 4 to 5 times a week, without fail, he would take a seat in my section. If I wasn't working, he'd ask for me by name. If I wasn't there, he'd turn around and leave. At first, it felt odd, but not yet threatening. I told myself he was just a lonely man, someone who enjoyed the familiarity of a friendly waitress. That's how predators work. They creep in slowly, making themselves seem harmless, until you're caught in their net before you even realize it. He talked a lot, asked endless questions. I answered more than I should have, things about my boyfriend, my family, where I grew up. It felt normal at the time. Regulars always asked questions, and waitresses are trained to be warm, approachable, easy to talk to. But Michael's questions sometimes went too far, pushing into places no casual customer had any right to go. And then came the holidays. That's when things changed. That's when the mask slipped. He began bringing me gifts. Small things at first, a scarf, a trinket, a candle. Then larger, more expensive gifts, jewelry, designer items. One day, he placed a Prada purse on the table in front of me. This was around 2000 or 2001, when Prada was at its peak. I laughed nervously, told him I couldn't accept it, made a joke that my mom would kill me if I brought it home. His reply made the air in my lungs freeze. "Well then, I'll just have to kill your mom." I forced a laugh, pretending it was a joke, but it wasn't funny. It was terrifying. I left the purse on the table and avoided him for the rest of his visit, my skin prickling with unease. From that moment, everything he did began to feel different, darker. He wrote me a 4-page letter about how he wished I was his daughter. He asked me, tears in his eyes, if I would be there for his knee surgery. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, he mentioned his wife. Until that moment, I hadn't even known she existed. When I expressed interest in meeting her, he actually brought her in. She arrived dripping in diamonds, with caked-on makeup, dressed like an opera performer in the middle of a sports bar. The image is burned into my memory. Her perfume choking the air, her smile too wide, her voice too syrupy as she leaned in close and whispered, "Michael just thinks the world of you." I wanted to scream. My boyfriend at the time urged me to tell my manager, to have him banned. I resisted. I didn't want to seem dramatic. But the breaking point came one afternoon. Michael walked in, sat down, looked me straight in the eyes, and said casually, "Wow, that was quite an accident." At first, the words meant nothing, but then my stomach dropped. That morning, there had been a car crash right outside my house. Not the restaurant, my home. And I lived miles away, in a completely different neighborhood. There was no way he should have known about it. No way, unless he had followed me. Unless he knew where I lived. That was the last time I ever served him lunch. But it wasn't the last time I saw him. He started showing up in random places, grocery stores, parking lots, always too close, always too coincidental. He even went to my mother's workplace, telling her what a wonderful daughter she had, praising her artwork, something I had foolishly told him about in conversation. He asked her to bring some paintings to his house so that he and his wife could buy them. She refused. Thank God she refused. By then, my boyfriend was furious. He demanded I go to the police. He was right, I should have. But when I finally did, the young female officer who came to my house brushed me off with a condescending smile. "I had admirers too when I was your age," she said, almost mocking me. She refused to file a report. That dismissal, that failure, gave him more time, more freedom, more chances. Michael grew more aggressive. When I refused to serve him, he caused scenes in the restaurant. Finally, my manager banned him. For months, he vanished. Slowly, I began to breathe again. I wanted so badly to believe it was over, but it wasn't. 6 months later, the same officer walked into my restaurant. Her face was different this time, serious, pale. She asked for me. My manager brought me over, and then she said the words that still make me shiver when I think about them. Michael isn't Michael. His name is Robert. Robert had just been arrested for stalking another young waitress at another restaurant. He had followed her home, photographed her, taken her image, and superimposed it onto nude bodies before uploading it online. It was only then I learned the truth. Robert had no son, no wife, no normal life. Only lies, felonies, and obsession with young waitresses. And for months, maybe years, I had been one of them. Even now, I sometimes wonder if the only reason I'm still here is because someone else caught his attention first. When I was very young, barely old enough to form clear memories, I used to have a recurring nightmare that left me waking up in tears. It always began the same way and ended the same way. In the dream, I was a small child being carried away by a strange woman whose scent made my stomach twist. My head bobbed over her shoulder as I watched my family fading into the distance, their faces growing more blurred and unreachable with each step she took. A long blonde ponytail swung in front of my face, swaying side to side like a pendulum. I remember trying to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was locked, my body frozen. The dream always ended the same. I would squeeze my eyes shut, desperate to wake up, until I finally did. Most of the time, in tears, gasping for breath in the dark. For years, I told myself it was nothing more than a childhood fear, a subconscious manifestation of being scared of losing my family. But years later, as a young adult, when I brought it up to my mother, she revealed the truth. And suddenly, that nightmare became something else entirely. Every summer, my hometown hosted a massive street fair right outside my grandmother's house. Her home was at the corner of a busy street, directly across from an elementary school. Next door was a police station, then a library, a Chinese restaurant, and finally a gas station that fed into Main Street. During the fair, both sides of the main road were transformed into a sprawling T-shaped maze of food stalls, vendors, and swarming crowds. The air was thick with the smell of fried dough, popcorn, and grilled meat, with the constant hum of voices, laughter, and carnival barkers competing to be heard. I was 2 years old that summer. My mom was pregnant, my dad was with us, my grandma, and my older sister, who was 4 at the time. At some point, the family split up. My mom, sister, and grandmother went off to get food and play games, while my dad took me with him to a vendor's stall to look at watches. He held my tiny hand as we pushed through the crowd, stopping in front of a table glinting with rows of ticking, shimmering timepieces. For a while, I was safe, but then he saw a watch he wanted to buy. To reach into his wallet, he let go of my hand. Just for a moment, just long enough. When my mom came back and asked where the baby was, my dad looked down, and I wasn't there. Panic erupted instantly. My dad stammered, "She was just here." My mom's heart stopped cold. She shoved through the crowd, her voice ripping above the carnival noise. "Help me find my baby!" Strangers turned toward her, alarmed, some dropping what they were doing to search. But the fair was packed wall to wall. In the press of bodies, I could have been anywhere. And then, from the corner of her eye, my mom saw something. A detail so small it could have been overlooked. Amid the chaos of people turning, searching, and helping, one woman was moving in the opposite direction, away from the fair. She was heading toward Main Street. Her blonde ponytail swung as she walked, and in her arms was me. I wasn't screaming, not out loud anyway. My mother could see the silent cry on my face, the kind where a child is so terrified that the sound just won't come out. My little arms were stretched toward her, my face red and crumpled in panic. That was the moment my mother broke. She screamed at the top of her lungs, "That woman has my baby!" The crowd parted instantly, like the sea itself had split. But the woman didn't stop. She quickened her pace, weaving toward her car parked at the edge of the fair. My mom ran harder than she had ever run in her life, her chest burning, heart slamming against her ribs. By the time she reached the car, the woman had already opened the back door and was trying to shove me inside. My mother didn't hesitate. Fueled by raw adrenaline, she slammed into the woman, shoving her aside with inhuman strength, and snatched me out of her arms. She screamed into her face, "What are you doing with my baby?" The woman stammered, fumbling for words, her face pale and startled. She muttered something about how I looked lost and I was only trying to take me to the police station. But my mother's fury burned hotter. She pointed to the police station, only 2 doors away, directly next to my grandmother's house. The woman would have had to pass it to reach her car. Her excuse crumbled into silence. And then my mom noticed something else. 2 men sat in the front seat of the car. Men with hard, sullen faces, their eyes sharp but nervous, darting at the crowd gathering around them. The stench of alcohol hung in the air. Just then, my dad and grandmother caught up. The woman, rattled and panicking, scrambled back into the car. The men slammed the doors shut, and the vehicle roared off into the street. Gone. Here's where things get murky. My family never filed a police report. My mom believed it wouldn't matter. Dozens of witnesses had seen it happen, and everyone knew our family in town. If those strangers ever came back, she figured someone would recognize them. But they never did. To this day, she's convinced they weren't locals. She believes they came from a rough city 2 towns over, a place known for crime, gangs, and illicit activities. She believes their plan was to take me, to sell me. And she believes to this very day that I was no more than 4 seconds away from vanishing forever. When she told me the story as an adult, I finally understood. My recurring nightmare wasn't a nightmare at all. It was a memory buried deep in my subconscious. The blonde ponytail, the strange smell, the feeling of being ripped away from my family, unable to scream. It had been real all along. And even now, decades later, I can still close my eyes and see that ponytail swaying in front of me. I know, in some dark alternate reality, I never made it home that day.